I called my daughter Clara to tell her the worst news of my life. My sister Margaret, the woman who'd been like a second mother to her, was gone. Just like that. A heart attack in the middle of our Sunday baking session. I could barely get the words out, my voice shaking, my hands still smelling of the vanilla extract we'd spilled on the counter. I expected Clara to drop everything, to cry with me, to share the weight of losing someone we both loved so deeply. But instead, her voice came through the phone, flat and distracted.
"Mom, I'm so sorry, but David's throwing a big party tonight for our 5th anniversary.
Can we talk tomorrow?" Tomorrow. As if Margaret's death could wait for her to finish clinking champagne glasses. I stood there frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear, her words echoing like a bad dream. Clara didn't just miss the funeral. She didn't even call back. Not that day, not the next. And when the whispers started at the service, friends and neighbors asking where my only daughter was, I felt something break inside me. I didn't just lose my sister that week. I lost Clara too. 3 weeks later, she got a letter from my lawyer. I could picture her standing in her sleek kitchen, tearing open the envelope, her eyes scanning the words that would change everything. I didn't say a word to her about it. I didn't need to. What I did was something she'd never forget. Before we go on, hit that like button, subscribe, and share one life lesson you wish you'd learned sooner in the comments below. It means the world to me and to others who need to hear it. My name is Eleanor, and at 58, I've learned that life doesn't always give you the endings you expect. I spent 35 years teaching 3rd graders in a small Ohio town, guiding little hands to write their first stories, wiping tears, tying shoelaces. My classroom was my world, full of laughter and crayon drawings, but when I retired 2 years ago, the silence of my little house crept in. My gray hairs tied, back most days now, and my eyes, still sharp, carry the lines of every lesson plan I stayed up late to write. This house, with its creaky floors and shelves of children's books, holds my heart. But it's also where I shared my happiest moments with my sister, Margaret. Margaret was 62 when she left me. She was a retired nurse, tough as nails, but with a smile that could light up a room. She never had kids of her own, so she poured all her love into my daughter Clara when she was little. Margaret was there for every school play, every scraped knee, every time I was stuck grading papers late into the night. She'd braid Clara's hair, tell her stories about our childhood, and sneak her extra cookies when I wasn't looking. Clara called her Aunt Maggie, and for years it felt like we were a perfect little trio, unbreakable. Clara's 32 now, a different woman from the girl who'd draw pictures for me and Margaret. She's a party planner, always chasing the next big event. Her life a whirlwind of Instagram posts and glittering venues. She's got her father's charm and my stubborn streak, but somewhere along the way, she drifted. Her husband, David, is 35, a slick-talking entrepreneur who wears suits sharper than his promises. He's built a name for himself, but to me, he's the man who turned my daughter's heart away from home. They live in a fancy condo downtown, all glass and sharp edges, nothing like the cozy chaos of our old family dinners. Then there's Sophie, their 11-year-old daughter, my granddaughter. She's got Clara's hazel eyes and Margaret's quiet way of watching the world. Sophie loves coming to my house, curling up with my old books, asking about the stories Margaret used to tell. But I see the way she tiptoes around her parents, like she's afraid to take up space. It breaks my heart because I know what it's like to feel invisible in your own family. Margaret and I built a life full of memories in this house. Sunday baking sessions, holiday sing-alongs, late-night talks over tea. She was my anchor, my best friend, the one who'd laugh and say, "Ellie, you worry too much, but I love you for it." When Clara started pulling away, Margaret was the one who'd say, "She'll come back, give her time." But time ran out, and when Margaret collapsed that Sunday, with flour on her hands and a smile still on her face. I realized the family I thought I had was slipping through my fingers. Worse, I didn't know how much had already been lost. It was a Sunday, the kind of day Margaret and I loved best. We were in my kitchen, elbow deep in flour, making her famous oatmeal raisin cookies. The air smelled of cinnamon and vanilla, and Margaret was laughing, telling me how Clara, as a little girl, used to sneak dough when she thought we weren't looking. "That kid," she said, her eyes crinkling, "always knew how to get away with it." Then mid-sentence her laugh stopped. Her hand clutched the counter. The wooden spoon clattered to the floor. I turned, and there she was, my big sister, collapsing like a marionette with its strings cut. "Margaret!" I screamed, dropping to my knees beside her. My hands shook as I pressed them to her chest, trying to remember the CPR she'd taught me years ago when she was still a nurse. "Stay with me, please," I begged, but her eyes were already glassy, her breath gone. I fumbled for the phone, dialed 911, my voice breaking as I shouted our address. The operator's calm instructions felt like static in my ears. I kept pumping, her chest counting, praying, but deep down, I knew. Margaret was gone before the ambulance lights flashed through my window. The paramedics came, their voices gentle but firm. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. There's nothing more we can do." I nodded, numb, staring at the cookie dough still smeared on the counter. The kitchen, our sanctuary, felt hollow, like the heart had been carved out of it. I sat there alone until the coroner arrived, and even then I couldn't move. I just held Margaret's scarf, the one she'd tossed on the chair, still warm from her shoulders. I don't know how long I sat there before I picked up my phone. My fingers trembled as I called Clara. It rang 4 times before she answered. Her voice bright, distracted, like she was halfway through a laugh. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" I took a breath, steadying myself. "Clara, it's Aunt Maggie. She had a heart attack. She's gone." There was a pause, so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Clara's voice, clipped, almost annoyed. "Oh, Mom, that's awful. But David's throwing our big 5-year anniversary party. Tonight. It's a huge deal. Can I call you back tomorrow?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The words didn't make sense, like she was speaking a language I didn't know. "Clara," I tried again, softer. "Your aunt's dead." She sighed, quick and sharp. "I know, Mom. I'm sorry. But we've got caterers here, and David's clients are coming. I'll call you, okay?" I hung up before I could hear another excuse. The phone slipped from my hand, landing on the table with a soft thud. I stared at the spot where Margaret had stood just hours ago, her apron dusted with flour, her laugh filling the room. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake Clara until she understood what she'd just done. But all I could do was sit there, the silence pressing in, heavier than grief itself. The day of Margaret's funeral felt like walking through a fog. I stood by her casket, gripping the podium to keep from falling, while neighbors and old colleagues whispered their condolences. "She was such a light," they said. "We're so sorry, Eleanor." But their eyes kept darting to the empty pew where Clara should have been. I heard the question soft but sharp. "Where's Clara? Did she miss her flight?" I just smiled, nodded, said nothing. What could I say? That my daughter chose a party over her aunt's funeral? That the girl Margaret raised like her own couldn't be bothered to show up? The night before, I'd called Clara to confirm the funeral time. David answered, his voice smooth, professional. "Eleanor, Clara's swamped with the party prep. We've got a lot on our plate. You know how it is." I didn't respond. I just hung up, my chest tight with a pain I couldn't name. Margaret deserved better. She'd stayed up late sewing Clara's prom dress, driven her to college interviews, sent her care packages when she moved away. And now, nothing. When I got home from the funeral, the house was too quiet. I poured myself a cup of tea, Margaret's favorite chamomile, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the chair where she'd always sat. That's when I noticed her old knitting bag tucked in the corner. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe I just needed to feel her close. Inside, beneath skeins of yarn, was a small wooden box. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Bank statements, receipts, and handwritten notes, all in Margaret's neat cursive. There they were. Records of money she'd sent Clara over the years. $5,000 for moving costs, $2,000 for emergency car repairs, another $10,000 labeled medical expenses. My stomach twisted. Margaret never told me. We'd always shared everything, every worry, every joy. Why did she keep this from me? Then I found it, tucked between two statements, a draft of a text message never sent. Clara, this is the last time. You promised to pay me back, but you asked for more. I can't keep lying to Eleanor. If you don't stop, I'll have to tell her. Margaret had tried to protect me. She'd carried this alone, shielding me from Clara's lies. And Clara, my little girl, who used to draw hearts on my lesson plans, had taken advantage of her. I sat there, the box open in front of me, the tea cold in my hands. I wasn't just grieving Margaret anymore. I was grieving the daughter I thought I knew. And something inside me shifted sharp and clear, like a blade finding its edge. The days after Margaret's funeral blurred into one long ache. I'd wake up, make tea, and sit at the kitchen table, staring at the wooden box of her secrets, those bank statements, those notes, that unsent text message to Clara. My daughter, the girl I'd raised with love and hope, had been taking money from Margaret behind my back. Thousands of dollars, labeled as emergencies, that I now doubted ever existed. And worse, Margaret had carried that burden alone, protecting me from the truth. I felt betrayed, not just by Clara, but by the silence that had grown between us all. Clara showed up unannounced a week after the funeral on a chilly Tuesday morning. I opened the door to find her standing on my porch, her designer coat buttoned tight, her eyes darting like she was already planning her exit. David wasn't with her, but I could feel his presence in the way she held herself, stiff, rehearsed, like she'd been coached. "Mom," she said, her voice too bright, "I'm so sorry about Aunt Maggie. I should have come sooner, but David's party was a big deal for his career." I let her in, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see her face when I asked the questions burning inside me. We sat in the living room, her on the edge of the couch, me in Margaret's old rocking chair, the one she'd knit in during our late-night talks. I didn't offer tea. I didn't smile. I just looked at her, my little girl who wasn't little anymore, and said, "Did you know Aunt Maggie tried to text you the night before she died?" Clara's face twitched just for a second before. She smoothed it over with a shrug. "I was busy, Mom. David had clients over. My phone was on silent." She leaned forward, her voice softening like she could charm her way out of this. I meant to call her back. I didn't know it was serious. I let the silence stretch heavy and sharp until she squirmed. Then I said, "I found the box, Clara, the statements, the money Margaret sent you, thousands of dollars, for moving costs, car repairs, medical expenses. Care to explain?" Her eyes widened, but she recovered fast, too fast. "Those were loans, Mom. Aunt Maggie offered to help us out. We were in a tough spot. You know how expensive things are." She said it like it was nothing, like borrowing tens of thousands without a word to me was just a casual favor. I slid the unsent text message across the coffee table, Margaret's handwriting neat and clear. "Clara, this is the last time. You promised to pay me back, but you asked for more. I can't keep lying to Eleanor." Clara's hands froze halfway to the paper. She read it, her lips parting, then folded it quickly, like she could make it disappear. "She didn't mean that," she said, her voice sharp now. "She was just upset." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone I didn't recognize. Not the girl who'd run to me with crayon drawings, not the teenager who'd cried on Margaret's shoulder after her first heartbreak. This was a woman who'd learned to lie, to justify, to prioritize her husband's world over ours. "You didn't come to her funeral, Clara," I said, my voice low, steady. "You didn't even call, and now I find out you were taking her money, lying to her, lying to me." She stood up, pacing, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "You're making this bigger than it is, Mom. David and I needed help. Aunt Maggie understood. Why can't you?" I didn't answer. I just watched her, my heart sinking, and knew I was done pretending everything was fine. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Margaret's face, her laugh, the way she'd trusted Clara and been betrayed. By 3 a.m., I was at the kitchen table, Margaret's box open in front of me. I wasn't just angry, I was resolved. I called my lawyer, Helen Carter, the next morning. Helen had known Margaret and me for years, handled our wills, sent us Christmas cards with her kids' school photos. "Eleanor," she said, when I told her I needed to see her, "this sounds urgent." I didn't argue. It was. The next day, I walked into Helen's office with the box, statements, notes, that unsent text. I told her everything: Margaret's death, Clara's absence, the money, the lies. "I want to change my will," I said. "Everything. My house, my savings, Margaret's estate. It goes to Sophie, not a cent to Clara or David." Helen didn't blink, just opened her notepad. "We set up a trust for Sophie, my granddaughter, to be accessed when she turns 25, for education and housing only. No lavish vacations, no fancy cars, and if Clara or David tried to challenge it, they'd lose all rights, including visitation with Sophie until she's of age." It felt harsh, but it also felt right. I wrote a letter to Sophie, sealed in an envelope for her 18th birthday, explaining why I did it. Not out of anger, but to protect her from the kind of betrayal I was living through. I told Helen to keep it safe, along with copies of Margaret's statements and that unsent text. I walked out of her office feeling not lighter, but steadier, like I'd finally drawn a line in the sand. 3 weeks later, Clara got the letter from Helen's office. I didn't call her, didn't warn her. I wanted her to feel the weight of it, the way I'd felt the weight of her absence at Margaret's funeral. I imagined her opening it, her perfect nails tearing the envelope, her face falling as she read the words that cut her out. She called me that night, her voice shaking, angry. "Mom, how could you do this? Disinherit me? For what?" I didn't answer. I just said, "You'll have to talk to Helen." And I hung up. But the real shock came a week later, slipped into my mailbox in a plain white envelope. It was from Sophie, my 11-year-old granddaughter, her careful handwriting spelling out my name. Inside was a letter and a small memory card, the kind you pop into a camera. Her note was short, trembling with courage. "Grandma, I heard Mom and Dad talking. They're lying about you. I recorded this so you'd know I believe you." My heart pounded as I plugged the memory card into my laptop. A shaky video loaded, filmed from behind Sophie's bedroom door. Clara's voice was sharp, unmistakable. "If Mom thinks she can cut us out, she's wrong. David's lawyer says we can challenge her mental state. Grief makes people irrational." David's voice cut in, calm but cold. "Let her play her game. We'll get the money eventually. Sophie's young. She'll side with us." I sat there, frozen, my granddaughter's breathing audible in the video, soft and uneven like she was holding back tears. Another file was a voice memo, Clara talking to someone on the phone. "The money Aunt Maggie gave us was for our new condo deposit, not medical bills. Mom doesn't need to know. Sophie, My quiet, book-loving Sophie had been listening, recording, protecting me when I thought I was protecting her. I backed up the files, sent one copy to Helen and locked the other in my safe. I wrote another letter to Sophie, promising her I'd never let her parents' lies touch her future. When Helen called to schedule a mediation, I knew what was coming. Clara and David were fighting back, claiming I wasn't in my right mind. But they didn't know about Sophie's evidence, about the truth she captured in that shaky video. I walked into Helen's office with the memory card, the statements, and Margaret's unsent text, ready to face them. The room was small, the air thick with tension. Clara sat across from me, her eyes cold, David beside her, his jaw tight. Helen laid out the documents, played Sophie's video. Clara's face drained of color. "She's 11, she stammered. "She doesn't understand." But Helen's voice was steady. "She understands enough to know right from wrong." The trust held. Clara and David had no case. And as I left that office, I felt something shift. Not victory, but clarity. I wasn't just protecting Sophie's future. I was honoring Margaret's love. The love Clara had thrown away. The mediation was over, but the silence lingered. I walked out of Helen's office with the weight of Sophie's video still heavy in my heart. Clara's face, pale and stunned as the recording played, was burned into my mind. David's jaw had clenched, his usual confidence crumbling under the truth of their own words, captured by an 11-year-old girl who saw through their lies. Helen's voice had been calm, final. "The trust is airtight, Eleanor. No court will overturn it." I nodded, thanked her, and drove home, the Ohio sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and grief. I didn't hear from Clara for weeks after that. No calls, no texts, just a void where my daughter used to be. David sent one email, formal and cold, saying they'd respect the trust but needed space to process. I didn't reply. What was there to say? They'd chosen their path long before Margaret's funeral, long before Sophie's video exposed their plans to paint me as unstable. I spent those weeks tending to my garden, planting the marigolds Margaret loved, their golden petals a quiet rebellion against the emptiness in my house. Then, one spring afternoon, 7 years later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Sophie, now 18, standing on my porch. Her hazel eyes, so like Clara's but softer, carried a quiet strength. In her hands was the letter I'd written her all those years ago, sealed for her 18th birthday. "Grandma," she said, her voice trembling but steady, "I didn't open it. I wanted us to read it together." We sat in the living room in Margaret's old rocking chair, the one that still creaked with her memory. Sophie's fingers were careful as she broke the seal, unfolding the pages I'd poured my heart into when the world felt like it was falling apart. I watched her read, her eyes tracing every word, about Margaret's love, Clara's betrayal, my choice to protect her future. She paused halfway through, her voice breaking. "Is this all still true?" "Every word, sweetheart," I said, my throat tight. She set the letter down and hugged me, her arms wrapping around me like they could hold all the broken pieces together. "Thank you," she whispered, "for telling me the truth when no one else would." We sat there for a long time, the letter between us, the weight of those years lifting just a little. Then Sophie pulled out her phone and showed me a video, her smile shy but proud. It was her standing in a courtroom, her voice clear and strong. "I'd like to change my middle name to Margaret," she said to the judge, "after my great aunt, who loved me like her own." My eyes filled with tears, my chest cracking open with a mix of pride and pain. Sophie had chosen to carry Margaret's name, to honor the woman who'd given her so much, even when her own parents hadn't. That evening we went to Sophie's high school graduation. She crossed the stage, her cap tilted slightly, her smile bright as they called her new name, Sophie Margaret Ellis. I clapped until my hands hurt, my heart swelling with a joy I hadn't felt in years. Clara was there, sitting in the back row, alone. Her eyes were red, her dress wrinkled, her applause faint, like she was going through the motions. David wasn't with her. I didn't know if they were still together, and for the first time, I didn't care. Clara didn't approach me, didn't speak to Sophie. She just slipped out before the crowd dispersed, a shadow of the daughter I'd once known. After the ceremony, Sophie ran to me, her arms wide, her laughter bubbling up like it used to when she was little. "Grandma," she whispered, "I'm moving in with you next semester. My dorm roommate bailed, and I'd rather be here with you." I laughed through tears, picturing her books scattered across my living room, her music filling the house again. It wasn't just a victory, it was a homecoming. That night, as I tucked Sophie into her old bedroom, leaving the door cracked like I always did, she looked at me and said, "You gave me a life I didn't know I needed." I kissed her forehead, my heart full. "You chose it, sweetheart," I said. I just cleared the path. As I walked down the hallway, I paused at the photo of Margaret on the wall, her smile frozen in time, her eyes warm and knowing. I touched the frame, my fingers lingering. "She's going to be okay, Maggie," I whispered. "We're going to be okay." And for the first time since she left me, I believed it. I've learned something through all this, something I want to share with you. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose to stand by you when the truth comes knocking. Sometimes you have to let go of the ones who hurt you, not out of anger, but to protect the ones who still believe in love, in honesty, in doing what's right. I cut Clara out, not to punish her, but to save Sophie from the lies that broke our family. And in doing that, I found a new kind of peace, not the kind that erases pain, but the kind that grows from knowing you've planted something good, something lasting. So if you're carrying a hurt like mine, if you're wondering whether to draw that line, let me tell you this. Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that set you free. Protect what matters, honor the love that stays, and trust that the truth, no matter how painful, will always find a way to bloom like marigolds. In a garden you thought had gone to seed,